Hey folks, here's your video for your Sunday reflection from week 4 of the semester on chapter 4. So I'm going to have to interpret it a little bit for you. Writing on the board is not my strength. Actually, I think I did pretty good on this one. I can read it. Sometimes can't even read it myself. So we're going to talk about, this relates back to French and Raven's taxonomy of social power. And so we've already kind of read and answered some questions on that. But social power, unlike physical power, social power is still the ability to influence and get things done, to change people. French and Raven talk about these 5 different bases, and Hersey and Blanchard and some others have added a couple others, but kind of at its pure form, this is what French and Raven talked about. They talked about coercion. So coercion, you get someone to do stuff, do other things that they're not normally doing, you change them, you influence them through threats and punishment. Threat and or punishment. The next one I talk about, you get people to do stuff through the administration of rewards. These two right here are kind of operant conditioning. So behavior modification through the use of rewards and punishments, that's just good old psychology, operant conditioning. So reward power is I get someone to change, I've influenced them through the promise and administration of some type of reward. Legitimate power, defined by French and Raven, legitimate power is that power that's vested in a position. So it's the rights and authority granted to a position. Referent power is admiration and respect, to revere, to hold in awe, to hold in esteem. That's referent power. And then expert power is the power that comes about when someone suggests you to do something and you go along with what they say because you perceive them as an expert. Then that's the power base that has been used. So this is French and Raven. Within typical formal positions within organizations, we tend to have the position powers. These 3 down here at the bottom are vested in a position. These 2 are vested in the person. So these are the personal powers, these are the position powers. When we think leadership, we tend to think of those things that are special and particular to a person. So expert power and referent power. And then the legitimate, reward, and coercive tend to be vested in the position. So I'm showing you this one. Now this is one, Etzioni, E-T-Z-I-O-N-I, Etzioni. This is his compliance typology, and I ran across this in my first master's class. And it has been a great one, and one that I've been able to draw upon ever since, including right now. So compliance typology, he published it in a book in 1961, and actually it predated Fiedler's leadership contingency model. This is really a contingency model of leadership. He just didn't get credit for it, actually until I wrote an article when I first got out of school, giving him credit for identifying these topics back in the early 60s. That's when his book was published. He was writing it in the 50s. For the ideas that would dominate leadership thinking and theory for decades after he wrote this. This is also very much, you'll see the tie over, it ties over directly with French and Raven because it is talking about power. All right, so let's make sense of it. The first thing we need to do is we need to start here. And usually I would write it up here, but I didn't draw my box far enough down on the board. So involvement, and this is follower involvement, or member involvement. It could be the same way. Etzioni was an organizational sociologist, and he wanted to come up with a classification scheme to classify organizations. And the dimension that he used was this idea of follower involvement. And then he combined involvement, he gave 3 different names to them, and he combined it with power to come up with this compliance typology, which we'll fill in as we talk through it. But follower involvement, we need to make sense of that first. Involvement has to do with the alignment of goals, values, and ideals between the organization and its members. An alignment of goals, values, and ideals between an organization and its members. So some organizations are going to have a high alignment of those things. Some are going to have a low. Low, he talked particularly about prisons, where people are there not because they want to be, but because they have to be. The high alignment, those are the want-to-bes. Churches, universities, service clubs, nonprofits. Those people will seek out and join those because what the organization stands for is what they stand for. That's the high alignment. And then the middle one, there's a middle one as well, The middle one is I'm as loyal to the organization as the organization's loyal to me. It's a relationship based on what he called a calculative methodology. I think this is the best for me now. If ceases to become the best, not become the best for me, then I'll go do something else. So that's involvement. This is what drives the model. And as Etzioni said, low involvement, like being in a prison, he called alienative involvement. The middle dimension, he called calculative involvement, where it's a calculated gamble. I'm as loyal as I'm getting loyalty back. And then the last one there, he calls it moral involvement. What the organization values and stands for is what I value and stand for. That's that high alignment. Okay, so that's what drives it. Follower involvement, low, middle, high. Alienative, low, I'm there because I have to be there. Calculative, I'm there because I need to be there. And then moral, I'm there because I want to be. Okay, have to be, need to be, want to be. Okay, on this dimension, the way I drew it, on the vertical dimension, he talks about power. And so how the organization induces or gets its people to comply with what's being asked of them. And so on the power dimension, he identifies three types, and you'll see the tie over right here. The bottom one, he talks about coercive power, coercion. It's the same idea that French and Raven used. This middle one is like reward power. It's remunerative power. To remunerate means to pay or to compensate. So you get people to do stuff through the use of rewards. Coercive power, you get them to do stuff through threats of punishment and punishment. And then the top one, he talks about normative power. Okay, it's the power of persuasion and the power of appeal. So with this, what he did is he went through and he classified organizations. This is where I would argue that this is a contingency model. So with alienative involvement, prisoners, hardcore prisoners, the only way to get them, the most efficient way to get them to do stuff, he would argue would be through threats and punishment. So he said ideal optimal compliance comes about when you match the power base with the appropriate involvement level. So alienative involvement, he says you need to threat and coerce. Those are the people who are there because they have to be, and that's maybe the only way to get them to do stuff. This middle one, okay, remunerative, these are people who are wanting to make sure that it's the best place for them at that moment. Said remunerative power is going to be the best to get them to comply and to do. And then the power of persuasion and appeal works best when you have people who are there because they want to be there. So think about a church, think about some type of nonprofit, some type of volunteer organization. You have all these volunteers who show up and you ask and persuade them. Think about working in maybe a department store at the mall, and you have people who are working because they're there because they need to be. They need the job, they need the paycheck, they need the opportunities that it provides. So they're looking, the best way to get them to comply would be with some type of reward. And then you have people who are stuck in the organization, who are not interested in helping the organization or what it stands for. Etzioni says the optimal way, the best way to get them would be to coerce them. Now what about these other ones? Okay, he actually drew on these, you can think through this and argue, maybe this would actually be a good little discussion assignment. He said these are maybes. These are maybes. So if you've got people of alienative involvement, what if you go in and offer them a reward? If the reward's tasty enough, maybe they will. But if the reward is not tasty enough, they would tell you no. So that's a question mark. If you have people of calculative involvement, they're there because they need to be there and they need to get the best benefit out of this. If you ask and persuade them, maybe they'll do it if they see it as being beneficial in the long run. But if they have to go to a second job and can't do something else that you're asking them, then maybe they won't do it. Same down here. What if you threaten and coerce these people? Well, if they don't have another opportunity that they can go to, if they're offended, then they might do it. If they are offended and say that's an appropriate use of power, I'm leaving to go to this other opportunity, this is no longer the best place for me, then I'm going to go do something else. That's a maybe as well. If you have people of moral involvement and you offer them a reward for doing it, are they going to do it? Maybe they'll take the reward, or maybe they'll just say, no, you keep the reward, put it back into the organization, and I'll do it anyway. So these are the question marks. These are the maybes. And then these are the no's. Okay, so if you ask and persuade someone of alienative involvement, Etzioni says they're not going to do it. Down here, if you try to coerce a volunteer into do something, they're probably going to go look for a new organization. So this is Etzioni's compliance typology. We could spend more time. I actually use it in my other undergraduate classes. We role play this. And so I'll have students take on these roles, and I'll have students take on these roles, and we'll see how performance comes about. But I argue, as we're going to go through them, that this is how it turns out. So Etzioni's compliance typology is a contingency model. It's right here. They said the appropriate style of leadership, we're going to use that to mean the appropriate power base drawn upon, how you influence them, is going to be dictated, there's the contingency, by the followers' involvement. So we take a pure concept like French and Raven and just have the power bases. Then we kind of tweak them just a little bit, and then we end up with the compliance typology, where the compliance typology then gives an explanation for when the appropriate power base is going to be needed to bring about optimal performance. Compliance is getting them to comply to do what you ask them to do, but performance, the compliance, we will hopefully have more than just getting the job done, but that they'll feel involved, they'll feel committed, they'll feel satisfied, they'll feel like what they have done is worthwhile and worthy of doing again. So that's it. That's kind of your lesson for the Sunday reflection for this week. Think through it. Maybe if you want to do a little extra study, investigation, we're going to be able to pull this apart more as we go through the power chapter, and then as we jump into these contingency models, which I believe will be next week. So that's it. Have fun. That was Etzioni.